Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at leadership development.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to be doing that by looking at this really cool set of workshops from Assistenza,
Oh,
led by this guy, Francesco Fedele.
yeah.
We've got this document that describes everything.
Yeah.
And I'm already kind of fascinated by some of the stuff I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, I was too. And it really struck me right away how much these workshops really challenge what we normally think about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And they emphasize over and over again that it's really not about the title that you have or your position, on the org chart or whatever.
Right.
It's about influence.
That's so interesting because I think so many people think about leadership as like something that you're born with. Or you
Yeah.
get it when you reach a certain point in your career.
Uh,
But it seems like this document's saying everyone has the potential to be a leader,
yeah.
whether or not they're, the CEO.
Exactly. And you can really see that in the way that the workshops are structured. Like, for example, there's a module called Unmasking Leadership. It's about influence, not titles.
Right.
And I mean, right away, they're dismantling that myth and showing people that anybody can be a leader.
I'm looking at some of these descriptions, and it seems like they focus on like 3 core skills:
Mm-hmm.
connecting with others, communicating effectively, and problem solving.
Yeah, you've hit on something really important there.
Mhm.
Those are kind of presented as the foundation of good leadership.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting how they connect that to what they call this accidental manager problem.
Well, what's that?
Well, it's this idea that sometimes people get promoted into leadership roles,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't necessarily have, the skills that they need to be successful.
Oh, so like you get promoted, and then you're like, oh no, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So these workshops can be really helpful,
Mhm.
for people who are in that situation.
So if you suddenly find yourself in charge of a team,
Yeah,
you can take these workshops and kind of get up to speed quickly.
exactly. And they go beyond just, telling you what the skills are.
Yeah.
They actually give you practical ways to develop and use those skills.
Okay, so it's not just theory. They give you actual stuff you can use.
Right, and they also make it clear that these skills are important in all sorts of situations, not just, in a traditional work setting.
That makes sense because leadership isn't limited to the office.
Right.
Like you could be leading a volunteer group or even just like a project with your friend.
Exactly, and the principles are the same.
So these workshops could be helpful for anyone, really.
Definitely. And one thing that really stood out to me was the bringing out the best in your team workshop.
Oh, yeah. What's that one about?
Well, they talk a lot about understanding your team members, what motivates them and how they like to work.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's not just about giving everyone the same tasks or, trying to motivate everyone in the same way.
Right. You have to understand each person as an individual.
Exactly. And then they connect that to another important concept, which is delegation.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, they say that once you understand your team members' strengths and motivations, you can delegate tasks in a way that really plays to those strengths.
Oh, I see. So instead of just giving someone a task because it needs to be done,
Right.
you give it to them because they're actually good at it and they'll enjoy doing it.
Exactly. And that makes them feel more valued and empowered.
I can see how that would make people more engaged and productive.
Yeah, definitely. And they also have this workshop on communication skills.
Oh, yeah. That's important.
They talk about how to tailor your message to your audience because, not everyone learns or processes information the same way.
Right. Some people are visual learners. Some people need to hear it.
Exactly. And they even talk about using storytelling as a leadership tool.
Storytelling. Now, that's something I never really thought about before.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They say that stories can help you connect with people on a deeper level,
Uh-huh.
make your message more memorable and inspiring.
So instead of just sending out an email with a load of bullet points,
Right.
you might gather your team and tell them a story that illustrates the impact of their work.
Yeah, exactly. It's about making that human connection.
That's so smart. I love that idea.
And it seems like these workshops are full of those kinds of aha moments.
Yeah.
Where they give you these practical and creative approaches to leadership.
But leadership isn't always about team meetings and giving presentations, right?
Right.
All sorts of different environments and situations where you might need to lead.
Definitely. And that's another area where these workshops are really strong.
Oh, how so?
They actually offer specific guidance on how to adapt your leadership style to different contexts.
Like what?
Well, one example is the virtual leadership workshop.
Oh, yeah. That's super relevant these days with so many people working remotely.
Exactly. And I think it's really smart of them to address that directly.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit more after a quick break. All right, so we're back, and we were talking about that virtual leadership workshop.
Yeah.
Like, how do you lead people when everyone's remote?
Well, it's interesting because in the virtual leadership workshop, they really focus on the unique challenges of leading remotely.
Yeah, like what kinds of challenges?
Well, for one thing, you don't have like all those in-person cues.
Right, you can't just pop into someone's office.
Exactly. And it's harder to like build rapport or even just gauge someone's mood.
Oh, totally. I've definitely felt that.
Yeah, so they really emphasize the importance of clear communication.
Okay, but it's not just about sending more emails, right?
Right. It's about using the right tools for the job.
Like what kind of tools?
Well, things like video conferencing, so you can actually see people face to face,
Hmm.
and also project management software so everyone can stay organized and on track.
That makes sense.
And then they also talk about the importance of like being intentional about team building.
Oh, yeah, like doing virtual team building activities.
Exactly, because you have to work harder to create that sense of community when you're not physically together.
That's a really good point. Okay, so virtual leadership is one thing, but I was also kind of surprised to see a workshop on work-life balance.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why is that included in a leadership development program?
Well, I think it's because they recognize that a leader who's burnt out and stressed all the time is
Hmm.
not going to be very effective at leading.
Right, they need to take care of themselves too.
Exactly. And they also talk about how it's important for leaders to model healthy habits for their team.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, like, if you're always working late and never taking breaks,
Yeah.
your team might feel like they have to do the same thing.
Oh, that's a good point. I never thought about it like that.
But if you prioritize your own well-being,
Hmm.
it gives your team permission to do the same.
So it's like leading by example.
Exactly. And they say that ultimately this creates a more sustainable and productive work environment for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about skills in different contexts, but these workshops also seem to focus a lot on mindset.
Yeah, they do. And I think that's really where things get interesting.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, there's this workshop called Developing the Leader Within You,
Hmm.
and it really emphasizes self-awareness and personal growth.
So it's about looking inward.
Exactly. And they encourage you to think about your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And to be open to learning and growing.
Oh, I like that because I think sometimes people get so caught up in the day-to-day
Yeah.
that they forget to invest in their own development.
Right, but these workshops are saying that leadership is a journey
Mm.
and you never stop learning and growing.
Okay, so one thing I'm still kind of struggling with is this idea of servant leadership.
Oh, yeah.
It seems kind of counterintuitive. Like,
Right.
shouldn't leaders be, leading the charge?
I think there's a misunderstanding about what servant leadership really means.
Okay, what does it mean then?
It's not about being passive or letting people walk all over you.
Okay.
It's about shifting your focus from me to we.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that your success as a leader depends on the success of your team.
Oh, so it's like you're serving your team by helping them succeed.
Exactly. And it's about empowering your team, removing obstacles, and creating an environment where they feel supported and inspired.
So instead of being the boss who barks orders,
Right.
you're more like a coach or a mentor.
Exactly. And it's about leading by example through service and support.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
Yeah.
It's not about mastering one specific skill or adopting one leadership style.
Right.
It's about developing this whole approach that combines practical skills
Uh-huh.
with the right mindset and this genuine desire to serve and empower others.
Exactly. And what I think is so impressive about these workshops
Yeah.
is that they make all of this seem really accessible and applicable.
Like no matter what your experience level is.
Right. They break it down into these really manageable steps
Mhm.
with clear learning objectives and actionable strategies.
So it's like they've created this roadmap for unlocking your leadership potential.
Exactly. And they also make it clear that leadership is not a static thing.
Right. It's constantly evolving.
Exactly. There's always something new to learn or a different perspective to consider.
And it's not just about climbing the corporate ladder.
Right.
It's about becoming a more effective and influential person in all areas of your life.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about using your influence to make a positive impact.
I love that. Okay, so before we wrap up,
Yeah.
there's one more thing I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
You mentioned these workshops address different leadership contexts.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed they talk about things like leading through change and navigating difficult conversations.
Right.
Why do you think they include those topics in a leadership development program?
Well, I think it's because they're acknowledging that leadership isn't always easy.
Yeah,
Like, you're going to face challenges in tough situations.
exactly. And that's where those modules like leading through change and navigating difficult